Hello, my name is Anneshia Freeman. I'm also known as the locksmith because I make keys for locks in the mind. I'm a master's level therapist, and my specialty is cognitive restructuring, meaning I specialize in exposing and challenging dysfunctional, unconscious beliefs that make decisions for people without their conscious awareness. I also provide people with tools, real tools to help them reprogram their minds with functional beliefs. Welcome to episode 2 in my Facebook and YouTube live series entitled Healing from a Trauma Based Belief System. Now, all of the episodes in this 4 episode series can stand on its own. So you didn't have to watch episode 1 to understand episode 2 and so forth. So during my series, I use certain terms. I use these terms interchangeably. So whenever you hear me use the words lies, issues, unaddressed issues, or the buttons that people push, I'm referring to the same thing. I'm referring to dysfunctional, unconscious beliefs that cause people to engage in self defeating behaviors repeatedly despite the consequences. So last week during episode 1, and if you want to watch it, you can scroll down the feed and watch episode 1, I talked about trauma based beliefs that affect people's relationships with themselves. So these beliefs are unconscious. So I talked about 3 trauma based beliefs last week. So this week, I'm going to talk about 3 more trauma-based beliefs that affects people's relationships with others. Now, there is some crossover. The beliefs we talked about last week and the beliefs that I'm going to cover this week can affect both a person's relationship with themselves and their relationships with others. But today, I'm going to focus on how these 3 lies, these 3 trauma based beliefs affect how people interact with others. So, first, let's talk about how these beliefs are programmed into a person's mind. Most of the programming happens during the formative years. That's why they call childhood the formative years, because the foundation, the form of how a person is going to think about themselves and others and the world is programmed into their minds during those critical foundation years. The brain is developed, the mind is programmed. The mind is programmed by how a person is treated and by what a person observes. But during the formative years, those beliefs are coded and stored in a person's unconscious mind. Now, that's a good thing if the beliefs are healthy. Some people are raised in a healthy environment. Now, there's no perfect family or perfect environment, but some people are raised in a more healthier environment. So their belief system contains functional beliefs, where other people who were raised in an unhealthy environment, their belief system contains dysfunctional beliefs, and in many cases, trauma-based beliefs. So I'm going to talk about first the trauma-based belief or the lie. Remember, I use those terms interchangeably, or the lie, people are only tolerating you. So there's one of the ways that this type of belief can be instilled in a child's mind is via maltreatment. So let's say a child is raised in an environment in which they are frequently told, get out of my face, go to your room, go outside, leave me alone, I'm busy. And a lot of times parents don't understand the impact that those words are having on a child. So over time, the child is being conditioned via maltreatment to believe that people are only tolerating them. That belief is getting instilled into that child's unconscious self-concept. And another way, the lie, the trauma based belief, people are only tolerating you, can be programmed into a child's mind is via maltreatment and observation. So let's say that the child observes his or her parents, siblings, or peers, acting as if they enjoy the presence of others, acting as if they enjoy interacting with others, while they act dismissive and irritated about the child's when they're in the child's presence. So that lie or that belief, people are only tolerating you, as being implanted into the child's mind. So, another belief, trauma based belief that affects people's relationships with others, is the lie your worth and value as a person is dependent upon the approval of others. Now, remember, all of these beliefs are unconscious. And in many cases, the beliefs are opposite, they're antithetical, they're the total opposite of how people consciously, logically think. Most people who are afflicted by these trauma based beliefs wouldn't walk into a room and say, "Good morning. I think people are only tolerating me. How are you doing today?" They wouldn't walk into a room and say, "Hello, everyone. I believe that my worth and value as a person is dependent upon the approval of others." These trauma based beliefs are unconscious, and their power has been in their unknown property. I say has been because they're getting exposed. And that's the first step in healing from a trauma-based belief system, is becoming aware of the unconscious thoughts, not the conscious thoughts, because a lot of people may say, "Yeah, I feel like I'm less than," or I feel this way. But a lot of people aren't aware that under the umbrella of low self-esteem, and under the umbrella of people pleasing, and under the umbrella of codependency, there's a list of dysfunctional, unconscious, trauma-based beliefs that support those self-defeating behaviors. So now I'm going to talk again. I'm going to focus on the trauma-based belief: your worth and value as a person is dependent upon the approval of others. That's a lie. That's a trauma-based belief. So during childhood, children define themselves according to how they are treated. That's how their unconscious self-concept is programmed, according to experts in the fields of neuroscience and psychology. So a way that this lie can be implanted into a child's mind is via maltreatment. So if the child has parents, siblings, peers, or extended family members who act as if they disapprove of the child, they're always critiquing or criticizing the child or berating the child, then this belief can find its way into the child's unconscious mind. If the child observes those same people, parents, siblings, peers, extended family members, that if they observe those same people demonstrating approval and acceptance for others while they act disapproving of the child, then this lie or trauma-based belief can be implanted into the child's mind. So the next trauma-based belief that we're going to talk about that affects people's relationships with others is this lie: you are at the mercy of other people's decisions. Now, this lie has a unique dilemma that has to be addressed. This was true when it was implanted, because it's usually implanted during the formative years. So during childhood, a child is at the mercy of the decisions of their parents and other people of influence in their lives. But at a certain point in the child's development, this belief should have been switched from true to false via logical consequences, meaning that as the child developed, it was the responsibility of the parents, and a lot of parents are not aware. They don't study psychology, so they didn't know. They through logical consequences, the child should have been taught you are at the mercy of your decisions. But for a lot of people, the switch never happened. So if they're in their adult lives obeying the directives of the belief that tells them you're at the mercy of other people's decisions. So now let's talk about how these three trauma-based beliefs can follow a person into their adult life and affect their relationships with others. So let's go back to the first one I discussed. People are only tolerating you. So all of these can produce unhealthy relationships. So let's say a person who is afflicted by this lie, this trauma-based belief, people are only tolerating you, and the belief follows them into their adult lives because there was no intervention, there was no cognitive restructuring, then this belief can cause a person to be in relationship with manipulators, people who act as if they're only tolerating the lie afflicted individual because they want to manipulate the person into doing things for them or giving them things. I call it the therefore factor. See, this trauma based belief will say people are only tolerating you. Therefore, you have to compensate for your presence with goods and services. I broke down that trauma based belief last week. So if you want to hear me break down the trauma based belief, you have to compensate for your presence with goods and services, you can scroll down later in the feed and watch episode 1. So people who are afflicted by this trauma based belief, they often spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money trying to pay people for tolerating them for short increments of time, because the lie, this trauma based belief, is running in the background like the operating system on a computer, telling them these people could be with someone better than you. So you have to do things for them or give them things so that they will, to compensate them for putting up with you. Thus saith the lie. It's not true. It's the lie. And I mentioned last week, I got a worksheet entitled The Lie is Lying to You, where I help people understand. I think I did a series. I did a series. It's somewhere down on my timeline where I broke down how the lie lies to people. So another way this trauma-based belief can affect a person in their adult life is it can cause them to isolate, because a person, some people, they don't isolate. They just try to compensate for their presence with goods and services because they feel like people are only tolerating them. Other people isolate. They go into isolation because they feel like people don't want to be bothered with them anyway. So they choose to isolate. Now, I talked about 2 ways that these lies are instilled in people's mind, which is via maltreatment and via observation, but there's a third way. Some trauma-based beliefs act as a landing pad that flags in other trauma-based beliefs. I call it the therefore factor, like I mentioned with the belief you have to compensate for your presence with goods and services. There's another belief that this lie, people are only tolerating you, will flag in. It will flag in the lie, personal safety requires isolation, because a lot of people who struggle with this trauma-based belief, they don't like the way they feel around people. And if you notice, these are my cognitive restructuring cards, by the way. If you notice, around the trauma-based belief, I have certain feeling words. These are examples of how this trauma-based belief can cause a person to feel when it gets triggered. So a person can feel frustrated, despised, inadequate, lonely, self-conscious, bitter, rejected, jealous. So people, a lot of times, they don't want to feel like that. So they isolate. They isolate so that they're not around people, so that this belief doesn't get triggered. Another way that this trauma-based belief can affect people's relationships with others is it can cause them to sabotage their relationships, because the lie is saying people are only tolerating you. So this lie can cause them to get on their significant other's nerve. So they'll be asking their significant other, are you mad at me? Are you upset with me? Did I do something wrong? And so over time, their significant other gets tired of trying to validate them. People who are afflicted by this lie, they're not aware of what they're doing, but they're actually asking their significant other to deactivate the lie for them. So when they keep saying, are you mad at me? Are you upset at me? And their significant other may have just had a bad day at work and they're just a little frustrated, and there was a lot of rush hour traffic, and they just may need a half an hour to decompress. But this trauma-based belief will make the lie afflicted person, will make them feel like, oh, my significant other is acting frustrated, it has to do with me, when they're just tired or had a bad day. So it can cause a person to sabotage their relationship. So I'm going to read the functional belief. So this is the trauma-based belief, the dysfunctional belief, and I'm going to read the functional belief that challenges this trauma-based lie. The world is full of impatient, intolerant, mean, easily agitated people, but that's not everyone. And it's up to me if I allow those individuals to infect me with their dispositions. If people act as if they are only tolerating my presence, then there are several ways I can look at it. One, I may be around people who are mean and do not like anybody. And I need to ask myself, why am I there? And that's in your personal life. You can't control who you work with. Two, I may be actually doing annoying, irritating things to cause a self fulfilling prophecy. And I just mentioned how some people do that in their relationships. They get on people's nerves by asking them, am I getting on your nerves over and over again until they're like, yeah, now you're getting on my nerves. Okay. So that's a self fulfilling prophecy. Three, I may be taking individuals' exhaustion or depression as evidence against myself, and that's self centered of me. People have a right to be in a bad mood or have a bad day. Am I only tolerating myself? Do I celebrate me? Others receive clues as to how to treat me from how I treat myself. When it's all said and done, I'm responsible for the way I perceive and interpret things. Now, I want to make this point. I didn't do this last week. If when people are healing from trauma-based beliefs, I work individually with people. I help people understand that you will encounter people who will make the lie appear true by how they treat you. I call them the negative co-stars, and I identify those people down at the bottom when I talk about the cast members, people who act irritated and easily irritated and agitated, and everything everybody does gets on their nerves. Those people will validate this trauma-based belief. But a lot of them are struggling with their own trauma-based belief. So for every victim-based belief, and I'm not calling people victims or villains, I'm just distinguishing between two different types of belief systems. But a lot of people who struggle with this victim-based belief, they often encounter people who struggle with the villain-based belief. Every victim-based belief has a villain-based counterpart. So there are people who struggle with the lie. People are nerve-wracking and barely tolerable most of the time. So people who struggle with this trauma-based belief, and it's trauma-based also, people who struggle with this trauma-based belief will often trigger this belief in others. So now I'm going to talk about how the next trauma-based belief we're discussing this episode can follow a person into their adult life and affect their relationships with others. So now I'm going to talk about the lie. Your worth and value as a person is dependent upon the approval of others. So this lie will cause individuals to seek constant validation from others. So they're always looking to other people to validate them, to compliment them, to tell them they're okay. And so that's one way that it can affect individuals. Another way that this trauma-based belief can affect people's relationships with others is that it can cause an individual who's afflicted by the lie to make decisions based on the facial expressions, vocal tone, voice inflection, and body language of others, seeking approval, trying to avoid disapproval. One noted expert in the fields of neuroscience and psychology says when these beliefs are coded and stored into a child's mind during the formative years, the belief is coded and stored with the facial expressions, vocal tones, voice inflection, and body language of the people who were involved in the implantation process. Years later, those are the triggers. So a lot of people who struggle with this trauma-based belief, your worth and value as a person is dependent on the approval of others, they will make decisions based on people's facial expressions, based on people's vocal tones, voice inflection, body language. That's too much control for anybody to have over you. There are some people making life-altering decisions based on someone's facial expression, based on someone's vocal tone. But we're going to heal from those trauma trauma-based belief. That's what this series is about. And the first step is awareness, because as I said, these trauma-based beliefs are unconscious. Another way that this lie can affect the individual's relationships with others is they only feel good about themselves if someone approves of them. If someone is mad at them, then they don't feel good about themselves. So that means they're in this trapped, they're in this position where they feel trapped, and they can often feel resentful and angry at someone else because they believe that the other person who may be disapproving of them is making them feel a certain way. That person is not making that individual feel a certain way. The trauma-based belief, and that's why I have those feelings around the lie, this trauma-based belief will make a person feel frustrated, dependent, like they need somebody else to approve of them so they can feel okay, or approve of their decisions so that they can move forward. It'll make a person feel dependent, bitter, humiliated, panicky, rejected, inhibited, and provoked. So this belief will affect people's relationships with others, because the belief, because it's unconscious, will make an individual angry at someone when they don't. The anger is because that person isn't approving of the lie afflicted individual. You don't need their approval. And we're going to talk about it in a minute, because I'm going to challenge this trauma-based belief. And another way that this lie can affect the individual is it can cause them to sabotage their relationships by constantly seeking approval from their significant other, or seeking it outside of their relationship and causing problems with their significant other. So now I'm going to read the functional belief that challenges this trauma-based belief. It's nice to have the approval of others, but it's not necessary. Certainly, my value as a person is not contingent on whether or not someone else approves of me. The key word in self-worth is self. How I feel about myself is the key to how I will live. If I feel good about myself, then I will communicate that message to others through my words and actions. If I don't like myself and I need others to accept me before I accept myself, then I will communicate that belief to others through my words and actions. Manipulative individuals will take me up on my offer to try to win their approval, and will charge me by the minute for their weak, meaningless validation. Why would I care about the opinion of people who support themselves by manipulating others? What a waste of time and energy. I accept myself. Now, it's a process. It takes time to internalize this belief, and there's work that it involves, that I'm giving you tools now. The first tool is awareness. It's hard to fight an invisible enemy. These beliefs hide in people's unconscious minds. So now let's talk about the final trauma-based belief that I'm covering in this episode. You are at the mercy of other people's decisions. This belief will follow a person into their adult lives if there's no intervention, if there is no cognitive restructuring, and it'll cause a person to be in relationships with others in which they accept pings without ponging. So I just use that as an analogy. If someone pings, you have a right to pong. And I don't mean doing anything illegal or violent. I mean that you have a right to set boundaries with people, to stand up for yourself. But this trauma-based belief tells people you're at the mercy of other people's decisions. So if a person makes a decision that affects you, you're powerless to do anything. No, you're not. So let me give a real life example. I have a lot of intellectual property. I have 10 copyrights and 2 registered trademarks. And over the years, I have had a few instances where I had to have my copyright trademark lawyer send out cease and desist letters because people were trying to violate either my copyright or my registered trademarks. And I will contact the individual or entity first and explain to them, this is my intellectual property. We can negotiate if you want me to train you or if you want a license to use. And I've had a few people that are like, disregarded me me. So I contacted my lawyer because they ping and I pung because I don't believe I don't struggle with this belief that you're at the mercy of other people's decisions. I healed from that trauma-based belief, so I no longer struggle with that lie. So I just wanted to give a real life example of how to pong when someone pings. And then another way that this trauma based belief can affect individuals' relationships with others is it can cause a person to live in fear, constant anxiety of what someone will do that will impact them, that someone may do that will impact them negatively, because people do things all the time without taking into some people do things often without taking into consideration how their actions are going to impact others. And a lot of times individuals, they struggle with their own trauma-based belief, but it's the opposite. So there are individuals who struggle with the unconscious belief people are at the mercy of my decisions. So they make decisions without taking the safety and well-being of others into consideration. And people who struggle with this trauma-based belief, you are at the mercy of other people's decisions, they when they encounter someone with this belief, they don't know that they have a right to set a boundary with that person. You know, like they don't know that they can say, oh, that's your cognitive distortion. I'm not at the mercy of your decision. If you ping me, I'm a pong you, meaning I'm gonna set a boundary. I'm going to take action, nothing violent, nothing illegal, but I'm going to take action to do damage control. If you did something that affected me without my permission, I'm not at the mercy of your decisions. But if a person is struggling with this trauma-based belief, they don't know they have a right to do that. And another way this lie can affect an individual's relationships with others is it will cause the afflicted individual to act as a safety net for irresponsible or lazy people. So they have people in their lives that they love, family members, but these people are making really poor decisions. So they feel like, oh, because I love that person, I'm at the mercy of their decisions. So I'm gonna keep bailing them out of jail. I'm gonna keep paying their bills because they spent their money on going out partying or something. You're not at the mercy of their decisions, right? As so I'm going to read the functional belief that challenges this trauma-based lie. I am at the mercy of other people's decisions if I allow myself to be. I am an adult more than capable of calling cut on any scene in my life that is not conducive to my mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, or financial well-being. When I was a child, I was at the mercy of the decisions of the adults in my life. That was then, this is now. I will take charge of my life and my personal responsibilities. If I don't, then I am signing a contract with others saying that I am giving them control of my life and my well being, and I will humbly accept whatever decisions they make. Once I internalize that I am not at the mercy of other people's decisions, I will be amazed at all the creative energy I possess to maneuver obstacles put in my road by others. A decision not to make a decision is a decision. I can decide to position myself so that the negative actions of others do not affect me. So that's all for episode 2 in my Facebook and YouTube live series entitled Healing from a Trauma-Based Belief System. If you would like more information about my work, I'm going to put the link to my store page, my website in the comment section. You can purchase a set of the 100 most commonly seen unconscious beliefs, victim-based beliefs. It also comes with a set of the 100 most commonly seen villain-based beliefs, and it comes with this workbook that explains about how these beliefs are implanted into a person's mind. It also has worksheets and strategies to help you internalize the functional beliefs. You can internalize a functional belief. You can heal to the point where the functional belief becomes your default thought. How do I know? Because I'm a survivor of horrific childhood trauma, and I have healed from those trauma-based beliefs. I recently released my life story, and it's available on Amazon. But my workbook and card sets are available on my store page. But you can get my life story on Amazon. But my other workbooks, like this workbook, What's Really Going On, it has 31 cognitive restructuring articles. It's available on my website. My card sets and workbooks are available on my website. I also have a workbook that I sell, and I offer that is also sold with the card sets, and it's entitled My Unaddressed Issues Make My Budget and My Schedule. I have a master's in social work and a master's in business administration, and for my MBA they taught us how to quantify things, so I can quantify how much time and how much money these trauma-based beliefs cost people. Every one of these beliefs make demands on people's time, their money, and their energy. I also have a workbook entitled The Adult Reenactment of the Childhood Script. So all of these are available on my website, my store page, except for my life story. It's available on Amazon. So again, that's all for episode 2 in my Facebook and YouTube live series entitled Healing from a Trauma-Based Belief System. I look forward to seeing you next week next Tuesday at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time for episode 3.